I've got a story that stuck with me for years, something that happened in the eerie hours of an early morning that I still can't explain. It was back when I was living at my parents' house in a rural area of Florida, a cozy place nearly surrounded by dense woods. The forest had always given me a sense of mystery, often shrouded in fog and whispering with the sounds of unseen creatures. But one particular morning, my view of those woods changed entirely. It was around 4:30 or 5 a.m., still dark outside, the kind of darkness that seems to swallow everything. I was taking my dog out, a routine that usually felt comforting in its familiarity. The air was crisp, the kind that wakes you up instantly, and the only sound was the distant rustling of leaves. My dog, a keen-nosed retriever, was busy sniffing around the corner of the front yard. I was half awake, my mind still foggy with sleep when I saw it. At first it was just a shape, a dark figure emerging from the backyard close to the woods. It was about the size of a large dog moving on all fours, and my initial thought was that it was a stray animal. But as I watched, something unnerving happened. The figure, which was moving relatively quickly, suddenly stood up on two legs. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. It was no longer moving like an animal. Its gait was awkward, jerky, as if it wasn't used to walking upright. What happened next is etched in my mind forever. The creature, or whatever it was, started flailing its arms or limbs or whatever they were. It was like it was struggling with itself, caught in some kind of internal battle. Its movements were frantic, almost panicked. I didn't stick around to see more. Instinct took over. I grabbed my dog, who was oblivious to the whole thing, and we ran back inside, slamming the door behind us. My dog seemed unfazed, but I was shaking, my mind racing with questions. What was that thing? Was it a person? An animal? Something else? I peeked out the window, but it was too dark to see anything. The figure was gone, vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I waited for the sunrise, half expecting to see some evidence of what I'd witnessed, but there was nothing. No footprints, no disturbed ground. Just the quiet, undisturbed woods. I told my parents about it, but they laughed it off, saying it was probably a deer or a large dog. But I know what I saw, and it was neither of those things. The way it moved, the sudden shift from 4 legs to 2, the wild flailing, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. In the days that followed, I scoured the internet for explanations. I read about cryptids, forest spirits, even extraterrestrial sightings, but nothing quite matched what I saw that morning. I even entertained the thought that I was just half asleep and my mind played tricks on me. But the fear I felt, the clarity of that moment, was too real. Years have passed since then, and I've moved away from my parents' house. But every now and then, in the early hours of the morning, I think about that day. I wonder if I witnessed something supernatural, a creature of the night that slips away with the rising sun. Or maybe it was just a lost, frightened animal, as mundane as that. I've always been fascinated by ghost stories and urban legends. So when I had a chance to visit St. Augustine, Florida, known as America's oldest city and famously haunted, I was thrilled. What I experienced there, however, turned my fascination into something much more unsettling. St. Augustine, with its rich history, is like a magnet for ghost hunters and history buffs alike. Its ancient streets, lined with Spanish colonial architecture, seem to whisper tales of the past. I arrived one sunny afternoon, ready to dive into its haunted history. The first day was everything I hoped for. I visited the Castillo de San Marcos, walked along the cobblestone streets, and even joined a ghost tour. The tour was entertaining, filled with stories of pirates, soldiers, and lost love. But it was all just stories, or so I thought. That night, I stayed in a historic bed and breakfast. The building was centuries old with its share of ghost stories. The owner, a friendly older gentleman, regaled me with tales of strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, unexplained noises, and sightings of apparitions. I listened, intrigued but skeptical. I retired to my room, a quaint space with antique furniture and a comfortable bed. Tired from the day's adventures, I fell asleep quickly. But in the dead of night, I awoke to a chilling sensation. The room was cold, far colder than it should have been. I pulled the covers tighter, trying to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. Then I heard it. A soft whisper, barely audible over the hum of the air conditioner. It was a woman's voice calling out a name I couldn't quite catch. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I lay there frozen, listening as the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Gathering my courage, I got out of bed and followed the sound. It led me to the window overlooking the narrow street below. Peering out, I saw a figure in the moonlight. A woman in old-fashioned clothing, her face pale and sorrowful. She was looking up at me, her lips moving as if speaking, but no sound reached me. I blinked, and she was gone. The next morning, I mentioned the experience to the owner. His face turned grave. He told me about the legend of a young woman who had lived in the house in the 1800s. She had fallen in love with a sailor who never returned from sea. Heartbroken, she would wait by the window, looking for his ship. Eventually, she died of a broken heart, but her spirit, they say, still waits. Could it have been her spirit I saw? Determined to explore further, I visited the St. Augustine Lighthouse. Known for its paranormal activity, the lighthouse did not disappoint. As I climbed the spiraling stairs, I felt a sense of being watched. At the top, I paused to catch my breath and take in the view. That's when I heard it, the sound of giggling children. I looked around, but I was alone. The laughter echoed, a playful yet eerie sound that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere. It said that the spirits of two girls who died during the lighthouse's construction play there. Standing in that historic beacon, hearing those unseen children, I couldn't help but believe. My last stop was the old city cemetery. As I walked among the ancient tombstones, the air felt heavy, as if charged with unspoken stories. I stumbled upon a grave marked with the statue of a weeping woman. As I looked at it, I felt a profound sadness, an overwhelming sense of loss. I took a photo with my phone, but when I looked at it later, there was a misty figure standing next to the statue, its form vaguely human, its features indistinct. No one was there when I took the picture. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on my experiences. The whispers, the apparition, the laughter, the ghostly figure in the photo, St. Augustine had revealed its haunted side to me. I left the city with a newfound respect for the unseen and a deepened interest in the paranormal. But the haunting of St. Augustine stayed with me, a lingering reminder that some stories are more than just tales. I've got a story that still gives me chills every time I think about it. It happened during a solo hike in the Florida Everglades, a place I thought I knew well, but that day I encountered something that made me question my safety in those familiar wetlands. It was a day off work, and I decided to spend it hiking in the Everglades. I've always been drawn to the raw beauty and unique wildlife of the area. I woke up early, bought a permit online, and set off excited for a day of solitude and nature. The hike started off as expected. The sights and sounds of the living environment were mesmerizing. Birds calling, insects buzzing, the rustle of leaves and the gentle breeze. It was a warm day, typical for Florida, so after a couple of hours I decided to take a water break. I found a log near the trail and sat down, enjoying the peace. That's when things took a strange turn. A park ranger rode up on an ATV, a model I hadn't seen rangers use before. He stopped beside me and asked to see my hiking permit. I showed it to him, but he frowned and said it was fake and that he'd have to write me a ticket. I was taken aback. I had just bought the permit that morning. I protested, but he insisted it was invalid and asked me to accompany him back to the station on his ATV. That's when my alarm bell started ringing. Something about the ranger felt off. His uniform looked slightly different from what I'd seen before, less official somehow, and his demeanor was more aggressive than any park ranger I'd encountered. I asked for identification, but he brushed me off, saying he'd show it to me at the station. My gut screamed that something was very wrong. I told him I wasn't going anywhere with him and started walking back to my car. The ranger followed me for a bit, insisting that I was making a mistake and threatening to call the police. But eventually he left, speeding away on his ATV. The walk back to my car was the longest and most terrifying of my life. Every rustle in the underbrush made me jump, half expecting the fake ranger or someone else to jump out. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that ATV following me. When I finally got back to my car, I was shaking. The relief of making it back safely was overwhelming, but so were the questions. What did that guy want with me? Was he planning to kidnap me? Or worse, I reported the incident to the real park authorities. They took it seriously and said they'd look into it, but I never heard anything back. They did confirm that my permit was valid, which only added to the mystery. Since then, I've never hiked alone in the Everglades again. That experience shattered my sense of security in a place I loved. I still enjoy the outdoors, but I'm much more cautious now. I stick to well-traveled trails and always hike with a buddy. I'd moved down to Palm Beach Gardens, having rented an apartment site unseen. My family had vouched for its safety and comfort, and it looked ideal. The unit, cozy and on the ground floor, was nestled at the edge of the complex near the main road. It seemed perfect, or so I thought. The first night in my new home was anything but peaceful. After a long day of moving, I crashed early, sinking into the unfamiliar yet welcoming embrace of my new bed. The exhaustion of the day pulled me into a deep sleep. But at around 3 a.m., a strange sound yanked me back to consciousness. It was a soft, persistent knocking on my patio door. In my groggy state, I first thought it was part of a dream. But as my sleep-fogged brain cleared, the realization that the sound was real and far too close sent a shiver down my spine. I lay there, heart pounding, listening to the knocking continue. It was gentle, almost hesitant, as if the person on the other side was trying not to wake anyone else. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it a neighbor? A lost traveler? Then the doorknob jiggled, a quiet, cautious rattling that echoed ominously in the stillness of the night. Every rational thought told me not to move, not to make a sound, but curiosity and fear battled within me. My eyes were fixed on the silhouette of the door, barely visible in the moonlit room. The man's voice that followed was soft but strained, calling out a name I didn't recognize. "Jake, why aren't you opening the door? You're not answering your phone, man." There was a pleading edge to his tone, a desperation that didn't seem right. He continued, his words muffled through the door. "Come on, Jake, I just need a couple. You know, I'm good for it." The way he said it, it was like he was bargaining, his voice tinged with urgency. I was frozen, a mix of fear and bewilderment pinning me to the bed. Who was Jake? What did this person want? The questions swirled in my head, each more unsettling than the last. The stranger's presence, his pleas, his attempts to enter, it all felt like a violation of the sanctuary I had just begun to build. After what felt like an eternity, his shadow receded, his footsteps crunching softly against the gravel as he left. I remained motionless, my breath shallow, straining my ears for any sound that he might return. But the night reclaimed its stillness, leaving me alone with the pounding of my heart and a mind racing with what-ifs. The next morning, the sunlight brought a sense of unreality to the night's events. Had it been a dream? A fragment of my imagination spurred by the stress of the move? I asked around, but no one seemed to know anything about a Jake or the mysterious late-night visitor. I never found out if the previous tenant had shady dealings or if that stranger had simply gotten the wrong apartment. But that incident left a mark on me. For years, I jumped at the slightest noise at night, the memory of that soft knocking and the pleading voice haunting me. It was a harsh introduction to my new life in Florida, a reminder that even in paradise, shadows lingered just outside the door.